Hi, everyone. Welcome to Triumph, Asia's leading inclusion and diversity fair brought to you by Founded. Today, I have with us Vikas Srivastava, a diversity and inclusion enthusiast and country manager for Singapore and Malaysia operations of Quest Corporation. Vikas is an NUS alumni and a postgraduate from MIT Sloan and Columbia Business School. Vikas has led many formidable brands like Manpower Group and Azilon. I have known Vikas for a couple of years now, and every time we meet, he has left a lasting impression on how passionate he is in being an ally and the work that he has been putting in to ensure diversity at his workplace. And I'm super excited to have you here today. So let's kickstart. Uh, because the topic that we're discussing today is about women at workplace and the positive change that they bring to any organization because you have worked with various organizations and has been a diversity enthusiast. Our audience would love to learn from you, your experience. So, my first question to you would be, can you share some key statistics or trends related to diversity and inclusion in the workplace, particularly focusing on women?
Thank you, Sujo. Well, first of all, thank you for giving me an opportunity to share my views on a topic that you know is deeply personal to me. Now, participation of women in workplace to me is just not a corporate slogan, but it's something that I deeply believe in. And it's good for business, it's good for society, and in general, good for overall prosperity. Fundamentally, if you squeeze the sum and the substance of microeconomics in any country, there are only two fundamental drivers of GDP growth. The first is the growth in workforce participation, and the second is the increase in productivity. Now, despite all the technological advancements that we have made, productivity levels have actually been more or less stagnant for the last decade. Therefore, increase in the workforce is still the only game we know that's available in the town as far as driving GDP growth is concerned. And I think this is where companies and countries are able to accelerate more, they're able to accelerate more women entering into workforce. It's got a huge potential to increase GDP growth across several countries and several economies. Now, as per a recent LinkedIn survey, women account for 41%, only 41% of all the workforce. But as per the International Labor Organization (ILO), this number is more like 39%. Now, while this is a progress from sub 30%, which was seen about a decade ago, it still means that there is a full 20% gap between men and women are still very much underrepresented. Now, you've got huge variations in the same statistics between countries in the same region. So, for example, in India, women participation is about 33%, whereas for Southeast Asia, it's around 42%, which, by the way, is higher than the global average of 39%. Now, the two countries that I manage, which is Singapore, the women participation is around 61%, whereas for Malaysia, it's only hovering around 38%. So, despite being so close to each other, you can see that there's a massive amount of variations in the women participation. Having said that, these numbers are better than what they were about a decade ago. And barring COVID, which was really unfortunate and really unfair on women, I think there's been okay progress on women participation. I guess the only metric which remains low and where the needle hasn't really moved is women in leadership. Now, globally, I think only around 33% of all leadership positions are held by women, even in sectors where women are better represented at entry levels like healthcare, nursing, customer service. There are still fewer women in leadership. This is even true for an industry like tech, where you think it's hard skill that'll make the cut. In Singapore, for example, 44% of all tech workforce is women, but only 35% of director level positions are held by women. So I guess despite the progress, still quite a lot of work to do in this regard.
Interesting facts out there, I must say, because uh, I wanted to understand from you is that many women face unique challenges in the workplace today, right? Could you discuss some of these challenges and suggest ways in which organizations can effectively address them?
Yeah, sure. I think the biggest challenge, that I personally think is the bias or the mindset issue. Now, to assume that, women have to choose between family and career is really a fallacy, right? COVID showed everyone the importance of mental well-being. It means not only for women, but also for men, having a healthy balance between work and life became paramount for performance. Now imagine women have been doing this monkey balancing between family, kids, and work for such a long time, right? And yet they come to work with a smile, motivate their colleagues, collaborate, and work in general, right? Well with everyone. In fact, they've shown that they have the emotional maturity to take on the roles more boldly in a world, where we have unfortunately a crisis every 3 to 6 months, right? So I think it's really the mindset issue or the bias that exists, which is the number one challenge for me. Other obvious, the challenge is of course the flexible work arrangement or the lack of flexible work arrangement, the lack of parity in the pay for the same role, being victim of perception game, where due to their personal commitment, for example, they're not able to spend too much time networking internally with their colleagues or bosses. And this can lead to a perception that their heart and soul is really not into the job. Now, with regards to how companies can address some of these challenges, I think, of course, the biggest and quite obvious is providing flexible working options. Um, there's, I think, also a need to institutionalize a process where mandatorily, when you consider women for growth opportunities, as in rethink performance management, right? It's interesting that I read a study by McKinsey that women are actually more likely to stay in a company than their male counterparts if they feel that there is an equal opportunity for growth and advancement. Other options could be mentorship or sponsorship programs. They can be very helpful as well. And I think finally, irrespective of the stature or the seniority level of the woman, I think organizations should ensure that they have a seat on the table as far as decision making is concerned. So I think, yeah, these are some of the ways I suppose organizations can address this challenge.
I mean, I'm definitely feeling that definitely the amount of hats that they need to wear is very, very different from what we maybe face. And it's interesting that the companies are taking that initiative today, right? And in your experience, what successful initiatives or strategies have companies implemented to promote diversity and inclusion, especially for women?
Yeah, sure. I think, to be honest, Sujo, more than the strategies, what I've seen through my conversation with clients is that the companies that have been very successful in creating a diverse, inclusive environment are those companies that are actually committed right at the top to ensure that there is an adequate representation at every level. Now, I mean, today, since we're talking about women, but this does not only restrict to gender diversity, right? But it's
Mhm.
also applicable to diversity of all types. It really starts right at the top, mind you, and I can tell you from personal experience that it is not easy, right? The temptation is to fall back to what comes easy for us, what you're able to attract.
Yep.
But this is where commitment from the top is really important to ensure that despite the monetary opportunity loss, organizations do not waver from this commitment. In fact, I know of several companies where their regional CEOs or the global CEOs bonuses, by the way, depends on how many women or how many diverse talents they've been able to hire at a leadership position. And of course, some of what we talked about earlier, when we were discussing what companies can do, like flexibility of work, seat on the decision making table, training to employees regarding removing unconscious bias, all of those, strategic initiatives, all of those actions have actually helped as well, to implement and promote diversity and inclusion.
Interesting. Uh, so, I mean, my segue to the to the same thing would be that how can male allies contribute to creating a more inclusive work environment for women, and what role do they play in advancing gender equality?
Oh, they they actually play a huge role. But to be honest, men don't have to do much. I think they just have to listen, understand, and openly share a positive experience. The more openly men share about the impact, the positive impact that women make, I think more of a perception, and that to a positive perception builds that that company is a safer place for women to work, and that will attract more women candidates, and eventually more of these candidates will turn into employees. Now, as a man, if you are, if you happen to be in that privileged leadership position, you must, and by the way, must come down very hard on this so-called macho aggression of your other male managers, right? Who may just be plain right rude or offensive in the name of being committed to targets. You've got to stop it. Biggest piece of, I would say, affirmative action that you can take is if you find out that some male members have behaved badly with women, mentally or sexually, right?
Mhm.
Put an end to it. Make an example by taking strictest of the action, and then make sure that you talk publicly about it in front of others. This will create safer environment, and this will disincentivize, some of those sort of corporate evils like sexism or favoritism. So in this way, I think just by being bold and by openly sharing our experience and standing up for what is right at workplace, men can play their part.
Yeah, and I'm sure as as we progress, we have seen that things are changing. Things are changing for the better. People, I mean, men are more aware of what's in store, as in what will happen in case they don't stick to those rules of the society,
Yeah.
and that's very great to see that companies are taking this thing very seriously now. And my next question is pretty much uh, my favorite one, which I would say is that there's so much of biases that we keep hearing in every company, right? And what do you think are some of the common stereotypes or biases that women often encounter in professional settings, and how can individuals and organizations work to challenge and overcome them?
Yeah. I think the very first thing that comes to my mind, right, is the stereotype that women who are parenting are less committed to their careers than their male counterparts. I think there's a term for it. I think it's called motherhood penalty, and it's
Mhm.
unfortunate. The other stereotype is women are less suited for leadership roles um, because they can't take pressure of numbers. But then, you know, but then these are, we know that, right? We know from our personal experience that we have incredible leaders, incredible women at actually leadership positions. So clearly these are stereotypes. And I think there are a number of things that companies can do, and we have talked about it earlier. Uh, but unfortunately, as an individual, I can understand it is hard. I mean, the unconscious bias, by the way, that exists in men is often a result of society, right? The level of education or the simple moral values in the household that we as men are brought up. So for a man, who has grown up seeing women being oppressed, uh, thinks that this is normal, right? A child thinks this is normal, and in some way, you can't actually blame him. But I think the best way companies can tackle this is to institutionalize the process of role modeling. I mean, keep KPI or metrics for women representation at every level, and ensure that that representation is reported right at the board level, right at the executive committee level, all the way to the top. And perhaps there's merit in actually tying the executive bonus as well to these representations. For women, by the way, they can and should overcome by openly and proactively sharing your ideas, and most importantly, solution to your bosses. Uh, Sujo, you are a leader as well. You've got a large regional P&L to manage, and really, we know the kind of crisis that we have gone through in the last 3.5 years. In today's world, honestly, there are about 1,000 problems, right? And we would love for someone to come and give us solution proactively and take charge. So intentionally showing proactiveness, articulating your career growth plan is one way where you as women can actually overcome some of these stereotypes.
Interesting. And you mentioned about women in leadership roles, right? Just right now, you were just mentioning about that. So, what advice do you have for women who aspire to leadership roles, and how can they navigate the unique obstacles they might encounter on their professional journey?
Right. Honestly, I'm surrounded by ladies,
Oh,
who are all in senior leadership position, both internally as well as, in my social network. So in fact, I'm still trying to learn what is it that they are doing well, that's taken them so far. But yeah, coming back to your question, I guess one big advice I would give to all women, who aspire to be in leadership role, is to really think P&L. Incorporate more data into your lingo, into your vocabulary, incorporate more numbers. Do not hesitate to share with your boss, your HR, your senior manager about your aspirations to take on roles that directly impact top line and bottom line of the company. As I said, one of the biggest stereotype I've seen is that women can't take pressure of numbers, and hence they don't always want a P&L role. Women have to break this myth by wanting to get more P&L jobs. In the last 2 to 3 years, particularly post COVID, there's been a lot of talk about empathy in leadership. Guess what? And women are masters at empathy, right? Remember, the first lesson of empathy you learned was from your mother, isn't it? So if a woman can combine empathy with the aspiration of P&L role, target carrying roles which are sort of considered pressure oriented, they will provide themselves tremendous options, right? Themselves as well as to the companies and the bosses who are helping, who are rather looking to solve complex problems which the world seems to be throwing at us every 3 to 6 months now.
Yeah, I mean, and it's very interesting to know that you are surrounded with women leadership in your organization, which is great. It's really inspiring to hear that already these things are happening in organizations, and one of them is Quest. And I would love to ask him a lot more questions, but I'm just saying, since we have the boundaries of time, we'll stop here. And I would say once again, thank you, Vikas, for being with us here today and sharing
Thank you
some
very much.
insightful stories and views. And some of them were very anecdotal and insightful. And I'm sure the audience out here got a lot of interesting understanding on how they can navigate their careers and make the most of it.
Thank you. Thank you, Sujo, and thanks again for this opportunity.
Thank you very much for being part of Triumph Asia's leading inclusion and diversity fair brought to you by Founded. We wish you the best, Vikas. And thank you, because it was good to talk to you once again and catch up with you soon. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.